What up guys, it's Dragon Ball for Life here today and I'm back with another video. Now today's video we're going to react to Asura versus Kratos, a mismatch by Thundergod. Now this was suggested to me by Sunik Sunil. He told me to check this one out. He also told me to check out the, I think SSJ Ryu 1 Goku versus Saint Seiya, and I forgot what other one he suggested me to do. It was a recent one that it's been doing pretty good. Let me check. So right here. Oh yeah, he told me to check out the strongest versions of Son Goku by I think it was Toaster XD. So yeah, that video's been doing pretty good. So yeah, let's check this one out. And it's great because I did finish my Asura video on how strong he is, and my opinion on his strength is a lot different than other YouTubers. I know there's a lot of YouTubers that put him at universal levels and even above that. I put him at star level, at most maybe like medium-sized star level because of what we've seen. A lot of people will just go based off of implications. Maybe there's some additional information about him that I didn't know, because sometimes these game characters, they do have some outsources, something said by the writer and stuff. So I probably didn't because I didn't check that out. I just checked out the game and saw what was shown in the game, and I went based off of that and more like logically and more in depth than that. So I want to see how Thundergod's gonna handle this. He seems to have a video that's 44 minutes long, doing an in-depth analysis too. So he's also did pretty in-depth analysis. So let's check this one out.
What's going on, guys? TG or Thundergod here, dropping this matchup for you today. And I'd be lying if I said this wasn't influenced by one of my videos going crazy. Yes! Thank you guys for that. So I thought I'd continue the hype, as a lot of people in the comments were talking about, two certain characters who embody the angry dad archetype. Two very popular, very powerful, and very angry game characters. That being Kratos from the God of War franchise, specifically from God of War 3 here, and Asura from the end of Asura's Wrath. Now, if you're going into this video thinking it's simply going to be, who can hit harder, it's not going to be any of that. Both these characters are universal in the ability to take down and scale to beings who can destroy, change, or create universes. Due to that fact, I'll leave them both at universal and take more of an equal stats approach to this matchup. As to, I don't want to get too much into the scaling. It's not as interesting. If you think one is stronger than the other, that's fine. But I'll be looking at them as if they're at the same starting point in strength. Both these characters in their respective series are just the apex predator, going down and taking down everything and anybody. So let's kind of put them in the same ring, keep them at the same starting point, and see what happens. With that being said, make sure to like and subscribe if you're new here, and let's get into the video, guys. Now, Asura is actually a lot simpler to kind of talk about than Kratos is. He essentially, his main asset is his extreme adaptability. He can close unbelievable gaps in strength through his rage alone. Examples being, well, every fight in the series, but the main example against Chakravartin, where his strongest form gets stopped with a finger and Asura surpasses it, and Chakravartin in just his base form, Asura growing stronger with each literal punch he throws. And Asura's adaptability is not limited to simply a stronger opponent, but extends somewhat into hacks and abilities as well. A prominent example people bring up is Asura being able to adapt to Chakravartin's ability to stop time mid-fight. Asura's best showings in terms of someone comparable to God of War would be against Chakravartin, the creator of their universe, the one who embodies and controls samsara, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Asura also has, his standard kit that everybody's familiar with. He's able to, throw flurries of air.
Okay, there's a couple of things I want to go into this, but before I go into it, I was contemplating, should I say this in the beginning of the video or should I wait and watch the video because he might explain it, but he didn't. But the thing I want to say here is power scaling video game characters is a lot more complex than people think, because unlike animes or comic books or manga, it's simple. It's whatever's been shown on the story, whether it's statements or feats, you can go by that to see how powerful they are. Where it comes to game characters, is a little more complex because you have the gameplay aspect, you have the cutscenes, and then you have additional information outsourcing outside of the game, and those three things can change the courses of like the character's power. Like when you look at the gameplay or like the game mechanics itself, the characters are a lot weaker. They're not moving as fast, they're not as powerful, and they get hurt easier. Because obviously in a game you're supposed to be struggling. So you have a game where there's a character that's supposed to be significantly powerful, but he's getting hurt by weak underlings, and he has like a couple hits from them could well, obviously it takes a considerable amount of hits, but they can still lose to underlings. Yet in the cutscenes we see them beating some strong ass deities. So it's like, how are you struggling dueling against a bunch of underlings when you're beating, the top-notch guys in that universe. And that's the discrepancy between, video game characters power scaling. It's, the gameplay aspect and then the story mode aspect, and those two different things can have different levels of power. Like for example, Kirby, people talk about how OP Kirby is, but when you play the gameplay, he's not that crazy. I mean, he's getting hurt by weak little enemies and spikes, and every little hit he takes he gets like hurt badly. But in the cutscenes and stuff and in the story, it's a lot different. He does crazy things. So that's one of the things that I don't like about comparing video game characters' powers, especially to characters from outside video games, because then it becomes a little confusing, and it's like, well, that's kind of bullshit for them, because there's a lot of feats that make them look weaker, but then we're going to ignore that and go by their OP feats. But then it's like you have to take into consideration the story itself. So you have that aspect by the gameplay, and then the story, the cutscenes, what we see there, and then the additional outsources is basically the writer or the creator from the game franchise or some of the people that worked on it, giving their information, saying, oh, and then you see this too with anime and comic books and stuff, where you have like the writer or the they might have some editor there saying, oh, they could do this and that, and putting additional information, usually some like little novel thingy or guidebook. But with video games, they definitively get like the biggest and best feats or the most overly ridiculous feats for a character from those guide books where they have the author saying something. So there's already that. It's very complex because now you're gonna have to look through the gameplay, through the cutscene, and then that to use all that information. And then there's a lot of stuff that might contradict. But even if you do look at those stuff, just realize that they might have contradictions in their own right too. But yeah. For me, I feel like not going with the gameplay mechanics, because that is just to limit them because you need to play. But when it gets to cutscenes, they can do more ridiculous stuff. So I'll go more based off the cutscene, and then some off the guide. Usually the gameplay makes them weaker, is the weakest version of them. The cutscene is decently strong, and then the guidebooks add on even more ridiculous feats. But it always matters about consistency. Does it make sense? Does it work together? If it doesn't, even if it says it, sorry, we can't accept that. We have to accept what makes sense, and if there's logical reasoning behind it, especially in guides, because they can say whatever they want, but if there's nothing to back up their claims, then who gives a shit in the end of the day? It always matters more about what is shown than what is said. And also, we have a lot of statements in games, but the statements don't really add up to what we see in the feats. So that's one thing I want to add in there. But also, he stated that both these characters are on universal level of power. I haven't checked out his video and analysis on Asura's power, but I've done my own. I did my own research, unless he has some additional source outside of it. And I have heard countless people saying that he's universal and stuff like that. And I think his explanation is due to him being the god of that universe, who had the cycle of life and death and mantra and stuff. And I already explained that, but in this video, I want to go through it a little more. Asura is not universal level. Let's look at what we see in the game to see if it adds up. Now, I know I said the gameplay and the story cutscenes are different, but in this game, the story, the gameplay, and the cutscenes, are basically the same. They're intertwined, they're linked, because it leads into it. And on top of it, this game doesn't really hold back. Other games usually hold back, like God of War. Kratos should be insanely powerful. People put him able to lift up planets and stuff, but we see him struggling to lift up treasure chests and other stuff indoors. But he should be way stronger than that, be able to do far more crazier things. But the reason why it's limited is because it's gameplay and he can't just pick up planets and throw it. But in Asura, they're more ridiculous. They don't care about that. They went to that level, so it doesn't really count for that much for them. And from what I've shown, like I said, he grew bigger than the Earth, stopped a blast that would have disintegrated the Earth, already destroyed other planets. So it was a planet level attack beyond that, but that doesn't make it anywhere near universal still. Then while he was fighting the guy and chasing after him, he was throwing planets that were the size of him, so they were the size of the Earth, and he was destroying them. So he was destroying Earth-sized planets. Impressive, but still not insanely OP. Then he was throwing some mini-suns that were the size of these planets, and we know they're the size of planets because we saw the comparison. So these suns would be Earth-size. Yes, what they have is still destroying the sun, but it's not as powerful as destroying our sun. So we wouldn't put it on an actual sun's level. It'll be a mini-sun. And it's not like a neutron star or a white dwarf star that are heavily dense. These are just regular suns that were just miniaturized. So he destroyed those. Then he threw a giant planet that was Jupiter-size, because it was bigger than the other planets, but it wasn't so much bigger. and Asura didn't shatter it with one punch the entire planet. He punched right through it, a hole through it, which is a lot easier. And it was a big planet, but still, it's just a giant planet at the end of the day. And then his biggest feat was him destroying a sun that was being thrown at him that was way bigger, because the planets that was coming to contact it with colliding into, it was obliterating them, and you could see they were a lot smaller. But the sun that he was throwing was still not the size of our sun. Our sun's millions of times bigger than the Earth and other planets, and these planets were just like percentage, like small, like 10%, 5% smaller. I mean, 10 to 5% the size of the sun. So it was still pretty big, but I don't want to put it at average star level, because our star is average and it's millions of times bigger than our Earth. We can fit a million Earths inside it, so that's like the big discrepancy of size. So that's where I put him off. You can highball and put him at large star level, fine, but no universal level. Even those galaxies that are around the guy. Remember, this guy's only bigger than a planet. He's a lot bigger than a planet because Asura was smaller than him. But let's be honest, Asura was Earth-sized. That being was not that much bigger than him, to the point, because like to be the size of a sun, he would have to be millions of times bigger, and he had galaxies around him that were dwarfed. So he wasn't obviously a million times bigger than him. So the galaxies that are dwarfed around him, most likely these were mini galaxies created. It might be galaxies, but they're still mini, just like the suns he had. So that doesn't mean much, but he's going based off of the fact that the god of that universe is, created all this stuff. Like I stated, if he was the creator of all this stuff, first of all, how the hell did this guy get trapped in that dimension? Why did he need her, Asura's daughter's mantra to get back to his original form? A god who rules the universe and created it should not be being like that. It's just stupid. And on top of it, even if you want to ignore that fact, even when he killed him, the universe didn't die. He didn't create it. He created the mantra in it. We get a complete explanation by Asura that if he dies, the mantra goes with it. And his daughter's afraid to say, but we need the mantra and stuff. And when he kills him and takes it away, it ushers in a new era, our era, where there's no magic or mantra. It's just a regular world. And that's what happened. So the universe wasn't in jeopardy by this being dying. So he definitely didn't create the universe. They never stated he created the universe. From what they stated, and I think a lot of people get confused, and possibly him too, was that he created the mantra, the magical essence throughout the universe, which is still powerful, but I wouldn't put universal level. It's not very quantifiable, and I wouldn't put it at universal levels. Now, Kratos, on the other hand, he could have arguments there because of him being these primordials, created the Titans, and the Titans beat them, and the Titans got beaten by the gods, and he beat all the gods, so he would be comparable to that, because they did create the primordial universe. But it's still pretty complex, that. But I'll definitely put it more reasonable that Kratos would be universal level than Asura. So yeah, let's get back into it.
Punches from across the battlefield. However, his main asset being his ability to adapt to any opponent's strength. Even Yasha remarks how he's just an idiot who knows how to smash things. Also, Asura at the end of Asura's Wrath has his mantra core replaced, so there's no real reason to talk about his different forms throughout the game and their different multipliers and stuff like that. Again, I have a whole video on Asura's Wrath if you kind of want a deeper look into the in-game scaling, just because he has the ability to surpass all his previous forms and his base form. So no real reason to go over different multipliers, as it's simply a matter of how much stronger is his opponent than him, and can he adapt to that opponent's strength. It's pretty simple. The question now is, what can Kratos do against an opponent who can close any potential strength gap almost instantly at times? What does Kratos have in his arsenal to take down Asura before Asura could close any strength gaps? Well, Kratos has an unbelievable amount of hexes and weapons that he stores in his dimensional storage houses, so I'll actually go ahead and talk about what is most likely to work against Asura, not overlooking the fact that Kratos doesn't have a godly amount of hexes, but I would be here for hours if I went through each and exact one. Now, we can talk about some standard weapons that Kratos carry around. For example, a staple being the Blades of Chaos. Now, it's very unlikely that Kratos is going to be taking down Asura with the Blades of Chaos, especially if we're talking about an Asura as relative to Kratos. Even if you argue he could potentially main Asura, we know Asura has the ability to regrow his extra arms. But the Blades of Chaos can be a big issue in the sense that they have the ability to absorb the life force of Kratos' enemy while increasing his own. However, this is shown to be only after he takes the lives of his enemies, and is unlikely to be an issue against Asura, especially considering his body isn't made strictly of flesh and blood. It's pure machine, and even if Kratos uses the Blades of Chaos as a projectile, Asura has his own projectile to kind of match that. So at the very least, if we're starting them off as similar, it's very unlikely the Blades of Chaos would just be this overwhelming advantage for Kratos, even with like the absorbing life force point, which I think is kind of mute, but I wanted to bring up. Asura can even stop them midair with his own like projectile fist. So Blades of Chaos I can't really see being the biggest of issues. However, Kratos does have a lot more. Now the Claws of Hades, which have the ability to rip the souls out of anybody really, is shown to work against Titans and even Hades himself. Now this may work. Asura has shown the ability to resist this soul manipulation. As even though Asura's soul was sent to Naraka multiple times, he still came back due to his sheer will and wrath. However, when he's in this state, he has no memories and is more so influenced by Chakravartin. So to say that Asura has like cognition of this is a bit of a reach in my opinion. Now Kratos does have the ability to pull out Asura's soul, which is debatable at best for Asura, as even in the God of War universe, it is displayed as a bit of tug of war when we see Hades taking the souls of Titans. Now, let's say, it's a close tug of war and Kratos takes Asura's soul. You would say Asura could, reincarnate as he does in the games. Problem is, Asura takes hours to thousands of years to revive, which is an obvious L in this matchup, as that's considered just a loss. Like, he would just come back as a later time. Along with the Claws of Hades, we also have the Soul of Hades. Kratos has access.
Let's talk about 1,000 years of time. His death was weird, and also him and fighting is a little weird in the game because he loses multiple times in the game. He's saying that he adapts all the time, but he does, but he also loses. He loses and then he comes back and then adapts later on. But at first, initially, he can be beaten. He lost to Yasha multiple times. He got bodied by him. He only beat him towards the ending. Also, him taking his core kind of goes against the whole he gets stronger naturally. Because if he did, he wouldn't need his core at all. He could have just gotten that power boost by his own rage. So the fact that he needed his additional power source to do it, and Yasha saw that, hey, the only way for Asura to beat this guy is, hey, let me fight him, die, to see where he's at, and then give him my core. So the fact that he was willing to sacrifice himself to do that, if he could already do that, reach that levels of power without additional help, then why would he give up his life? Why would he sacrifice his life when he could just do that anyway? So it didn't really make much sense there. Also, his soul, he does go back to hell, or to Naraka, but he comes out of it. The first time when he did it, he was there for like thousands of years, then 500 years. And yes, I do agree with that, but the more times he came out and died, the faster he was able to come back. He came back in one day, and he came back instantly multiple times afterwards. So if this was when he was first doing it, yes, he would die and take a lot longer to come back. But as he died multiple times, he was able to come back more faster, and he does have a good memory. His memory started to get better as he died more also again. But also, I do think that the reason why he was able to come back is because he didn't have his soul obliterated. He had his physical destroyed and his soul sent down there, and then he was able to come back from down there to up to the living realm. If they completely obliterate his body, which I don't think they've ever done it, you still see parts of his body there. They could have completely possibly have killed him, and if they definitely destroyed his soul along with it, he wouldn't have been able to come back. But they just didn't have that power. And also, I do agree that it is a tug of war. People think that just because he pulls out his soul, he can't do it too easily. So if he does it to somebody that's powerful, they can hold their soul back and pull it back in, or maybe reverse it against them, because Hades tried it on Kratos and it didn't work, and Kratos did it to Hades, and it did take some work to do it too. So yeah, there's that. I just want to say.
Access to the Soul of Hades, where he has the ability of transmutation and power nullification. Kratos is able to summon the arms of Hades, which have the ability to transform the living into mindless underworld soldiers, as well as strip people of their magic. The magic point being possibly mute, as Asura uses mantra, a source of power tied directly to his emotion. If Kratos does decide to use his transmutation abilities on Asura, it could very well be a GG. This is contingent on if Asura could adapt far enough to where this hacks of Kratos doesn't come into play. However, again, like the Claws of Hades, Kratos catches Asura early enough, this could be a GG. The reason I say potential for Asura to adapt is, he's shown resistances to the possible existence erasure and reality warping. This ability might be too low level, which might be consistent as it only works on fodder enemies in God of War. However, you can kind of see a little bit of a trend I'm starting to do with the Asura side, to where it kind of gets a bit iffy, because I can only really talk about his adaptability so much, as he doesn't really have a lot of resistances in the God of War series. But let's continue. Now, I could keep going with, weapon by weapon for Kratos, but I don't want to do that. No one wants to sit here and, me go through each weapon. So I'm going to step it up and talk about some of the more bigger guns in the God of War universe. For example, the Power of Hope. Now, the Power of Hope gets into a whole other tier, getting into conceptual manipulation. being able to banish the concept of fear itself, the power of hope being the strongest weapon in the God of War universe, predating the primordials, who are abstract concepts that predate reality itself. Not only that, the power of hope has the ability to bypass immortality, being able to bypass the immortality of fear Zeus. The power of hope is also far superior to the flame of Olympus, which can kill Pandora, a being that is neither alive nor dead. This goes beyond someone who simply created the universe.
He said the immortality of Zeus, it was able to bypass it. I don't know if that was the case because in Greek mythology, Greek gods are immortal, but he was able to kill the other Greek gods way before the Pandora thing. So I don't think that was really the case. Maybe some people might have misinterpreted. Maybe I'm remembering incorrectly because that game, I haven't seen, God of War 3 in a long time, or the original God of War games in a long time, so my memory on it is pretty iffy, but I don't think he needed Pandora to kill him. I don't think they were really immortal in the game, because he was killing the other gods, and in mythology, all the other gods are also immortal, so I don't think he really needs that. Also, Pandora, I think the reason she died because of it was because her job, the reason why she existed, was to keep the box, safe from it coming out, and once when it came out, the tragedy from the box of Pandora's box, she was basically done for because her mission was to hold it. So that's why she was able to exist. But without that, her existence was futile. Also, he said that Asura has been able to negate existence erasure. I don't remember where the hell that happened. I've literally played the game recently, so that one on that side I do know more about, and I don't remember that at all. So I don't know where he got that information from. Maybe he might have explained in his other video, but for right now, I haven't seen any of that since I've played the game myself. So there's some additional outsourced stuff, like a comic book or something, saying that showcasing that and him doing it or whatever. But I haven't seen that, to be honest.
Universe or the cycles of life and death, i.e. Chakravartin in Asura's case, as the power of hope surpasses beings that predate these concepts. Now, if you want to make an argument that Kratos can't use the power of hope like on his own, or maybe it has to be drawn out of him like it was in God of War 3, I guess that's acceptable. I just want to make it know that this is just absolutely nutty and would be an instant GG in this case, as Asura has never been exposed to a force like this. The type of foe that Asura has faced in his final fight are the gods of Olympus, who Kratos absolutely just ran through like a college football team running through. There's also the Blade of Olympus created by Zeus. It ended the Great War by banishing the Titans to Tartarus, and after filling it with his power as God of War, became powerful enough to slay gods. Now, besides some possibly crazy stuff with conceptual manipulation with the blade being able to affect hope itself, the blade does seem to have the ability to ignore common durability, shown vaporizing everything in its path consistently in the series. Now, I can't see it vaporizing unless it's brought out in earlier stages of the confrontation. However, Kratos can just stab Asura with it as well. We do know Asura is a rival to Yasha, who's shown durability negating techniques as well, with Asura being able to contend with Yasha at every turn. Not to say these abilities would be on the same level as wide range vaporization, like the blade demonstrates, would be far-fetched to say the least, but it is something to note. Now, it should be pretty clear at this point that Kratos has a lot in his arsenal that I haven't even begun to cover. A lot more than Asura has. And this is strictly talking in terms of his weapons. I'm not even scratching the surface of resistances Kratos has when it compared to Asura's. Now, that's not to say everything Kratos has can actually work on Asura either. There's a lot of fluff abilities Kratos has. Example being the Amulet of Ouroboros, which can manipulate time by slowing enemies down and even de-age or age them, which would completely be useless against Asura, who doesn't age. Even when fighting against Akuma for 500 years straight, he was still able to just continue fighting. There's also petrification with Medusa's gaze, which allows Kratos to turn anybody in its gaze to stone. Honestly, this probably wouldn't have too much of an effect on Asura, as we've seen him move when turned to stone from hundreds of years of straight combat. Again, from the Akuma example. Along with this, it's a lower level ability that doesn't work on foes relative to Kratos himself. So to say it would...
Okay, so there's the outsourcing stuff. So yeah, he probably played some additional games with Asura in it. He was in the Street Fighter series. Akuma is strong in the Street Fighter series, but he's still only island level from what we've seen. He destroyed island. And when I read the comic book, Ryu, when he got the nothingness, and basically nothingness was the opposite or antithesis to his Dark Hadouken. When he got that, he was able to beat him, but still, it's not that hard to beat him. The fact that Asura matched him for 500 years is crazy. Also, I don't remember him having the ability to live that long either. That's weird to think, to be honest. But yeah, let's get back to it.
Work on Asura would also be a little bit out there. We can also get into their healing, where Kratos and Asura do have the ability to will themselves back from death. Kratos can do this via the power of hope. However, this was more so a one-time scenario. Instead, it's said that even by Cory Barlog that he's simply cursed and cannot die, even when impaling himself with the blade of chaos infused with his power as God of War. Kratos also has the ability to heal himself. He does this in game, whether he drains the life forces of his enemy, or as you kind of see more clearly in God of War 4, he's able to just heal his injuries on command. Even if you didn't want to say like he could do this, he's known to have items that assist and heal him, like the Orko's cloak. So his healing would be superior to Asura's, as Asura isn't really a healer. We've seen him fall multiple times in combat. Even when he's fighting Vlitra, he falls in battle and needs Mithra's mantra to resurrect and rejuvenate and make him stronger. Or even look at his fight against Chakravartin, where he sustains injuries during the fight. If he ever does get injured, those injuries stay there. So it's just really you could say they both have mid-level regeneration, but Kratos has just shown more consistently that he can regen himself like any injuries, whereas Asura is more so known to regen limbs. Even if he loses his limbs and he's exhausted, he'll keep them gone for extended periods of time. Kratos' curse makes it so the possibility of death is a lot harder for him than it is Asura, whereas Asura is in a perpetual cycle of death and resurrection. However, his ability and through his wrath makes it.
And that's interesting because remember I made the video about how to beat immortal characters, and the thing I mentioned is there's a couple of different types of immortality, and two of them specifically is resurrection immortality and just complete immortality. Immortality complete one is you physically or spiritually, whichever one you choose, cannot be completely destroyed, so you will always be there. Either of it's through regeneration or invincibility or whatever, that's what happens. But for his one, it's kind of like Doomsday, where he keeps on dying and getting back, but it takes some time for him to get revived. So I just thought that was cool to add in, because I did mention this in my video on how to beat characters with immortality. I talked specifically about, the different types of immortality and resurrection immortality and just pure immortality. And that's what they have. Kratos' one is significantly stronger. His one, he can stay there. His one, he will be gone from the battlefield and come back later on. But by that time, the people would already be dead, most people, and he wouldn't be able to get his rematch. So he lost and he can't come back. So, especially in death battle scenario, once they die, once they lose, they lose. So yeah, that he would basically lose even in death battles type of way.
So as the series progresses, it's harder and harder for him to die. Overall, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Unless you make the argument that Asura adapts beyond what Kratos is guaranteed a W in this matchup. He just has such a ludicrous amount of hacks and resistances that I didn't even cover during this video, as it's just too long. I can't go into each and every little segment. Even the abilities I provided are debatable at best for Asura. You can honestly compare it to Goku versus Naruto if you really want to look at it, how Saiyans have the ability to adapt constantly throughout the fight. Okay, how much can you make the argument of this person being able to adapt through this hacks, what I'm saying, before it becomes this discussion that doesn't really have conclusive evidence. The main point I want to get across with this video, however, is that Kratos has had 14 games to develop, with God of War Ragnarok approaching. However, I didn't cover any of the North stuff. Whereas Asura's Wrath is one game. So logically, the gap in abilities is going to be night and day. Now, again, not every one of Kratos' hacks is going to work against Asura either. For example, his ability to vaporize/deconstruct using Poseidon's Rage magic wouldn't be effective, as Asura has shown such resistances. But, that's a piece of hay in the haystack. This doesn't even cover conventional scaling, which I didn't cover in this video for a specific reason. This is more so a case of a character just having done more and being exposed to more and having received more than B character. If you took Kratos from God of War 4 and put him in this position equal to Asura, I could potentially see Asura taking a potential W, as God of War 4 Kratos is much more of a brawler than he's been in previous games, or at the very least doesn't have access to all the ludicrous hacks from his youth. In my opinion, somewhat much more comparable to Kratos. And let me know if you guys want a video on this, but Dante from the Devil May Cry series would be a much better match for Kratos, as they're both characters who have absolutely insane abilities that I could get into all day, and both had many games to develop in every category of their arsenals, whether that be their strength or simply their hacks, abilities, weapons, you name it. But that's the video. It's kind of a mismatch, and I understand why people thought this was somewhat of a debate. I didn't get into the conventional scaling because it's kind of also a stomp in Kratos' favor, and I didn't really want to just be like this bigger number is better than this other number. You know what I mean? It just wasn't really indicative of a good fight, and even then I didn't even scratch the surface of what Kratos was capable of. So, I'm not downplaying Asura. I did a whole 50-minute video on it.
So that was Asura versus Kratos, a mismatch by Thundergod. I think that was a really good video, but I do disagree with him quite a bit on a couple of stuff, especially with his analysis on Asura's power and where he lies. Kratos, like I said, I have played the games and stuff like that, but I haven't, gone through the older games in a while, so it's going to be kind of hard. But I think the thing that gave Kratos the biggest, victories and stuff was, one, he fought more godly beings. Two, the godly beings that he fought showed more feats. His godly beings, majority of them were kind of weak. Like, there was that one guy, I forgot what his name was. He killed him with one claw. You had the woman who was weak as hell too. You had the old man that was weak, Carlo. They were all weak except for a couple. Wyzen was strong. His master was strong. Yasha was strong. And and Deus. The rest were weak as shit. So God of War, like all the other gods, had some insane strengths in some areas. He had more feats, he had more stuff like that. He did have a lot more hacks and more stuff going for him, and especially the fact that he was immortal. Where his one, he would die and then come back and stuff. Him, he was just quintessentially immortal. He couldn't be killed. He even tried to kill himself multiple times throughout the game franchise and still just would not die. Now, I don't know if Dante is that powerful or Virgil and stuff like that. People say they're that powerful. I've only seen Devil May Cry 5. I've only seen the gameplay of Devil May Cry 5. I have never played any of the games. I will be trying to play the games. I'm going to be trying to do, like I said, my gaming channel. I'm still trying to fix some kinks because I tried to do it with Asura, but there was some problems, like the audio had some stuff that I had problems with. So I'll try to fix that up. I don't know enough about that franchise to say anything about that, but I do want to say this, that there's going to be the Sun Wukong game coming out, and we already know how strong Sun Wukong is, especially with that video that I did of Ivan the Unstoppable's video on it, and how ridiculously powerful he is in, the mythology. And I don't think they're going to take all that from the mythology to the game, but it will still be pretty crazy to see, that guy. I think the Monkey King could definitely be Kratos. If they use even some of the feats that we see in the story of Journey to the West inside that game, he's going to definitely be Kratos, and I think he'll be the strongest godly character in all video games. And if they do use most of the stuff from the actual story, he will be most definitely the most powerful video game character ever. Because there's not that many top tier video game characters when it comes to strength. But yeah, I would love to see analysis between him when the game's fully done, of him versus Kratos and him versus Asura, especially Asura, because they are both from like Buddhist lore and stuff like that, and they're both highly godly beings from that same type of fictional stories from China and stuff. So that would be pretty cool to see. That's gonna be cool. But yeah, I do agree with his final conclusion with Kratos winning, but I do have a problem with some of the stuff he said with his analysis, especially when it comes to Asura, not so much about Kratos. Also, I don't think he's saying that they're both universal level. You could argue Kratos is universal level. There's some stuff that I could say he's probably not, and that's just like over exaggeration from the story. Or yes, but Asura, I wouldn't put him at universal level. He didn't show anything on that level, but he is still pretty powerful as a character. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and stay tuned for next time.